So what are we gonna be doing today? We're gonna be learning. You're gonna be teaching us.
I'm gonna.
We're hopefully gonna be.
I'm gonna try and give you a sort of high-level view into how we make miniatures for gaming. And then we'll look at some different tools and different suites and apps that people can pick up and play around with. And we'll do a bit of follow along and see if we can build some magical swords, because that's a good way to spend a Saturday.
We've got some cool magical weapons in our campaign that we need
Excellent.
to custom sculpt anyway, so this will be perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me. We're going to talk about 3 pieces of software today. We're going to talk about Blender, which is the grey, very uninspiring, but trust me, amazing piece of software that you can currently see on my screen if that's being shared.
And free for those of you at home.
Yep.
And completely 100% free. Blender is amazing. It is a, let me give you the Blender elevator pitch. It is a fully featured 3D modeling, sculpting, animation, film compositing, rendering, art tool that is maintained by a charitable organization that wants to make 3D creative tools available to everybody. It is as powerful as anything that's on the market, and I use it daily in all of my professional work. It's fantastic. It's got an interesting learning curve, but it's brilliant, and if anyone has any interest in getting involved in 3D modeling, it's a great place to start. So we're going to be using Blender for some stuff. We're also going to look at ZBrush, which I'll pop up now with my D&D character, Cloven the Tiefling Cleric, on the screen. ZBrush is the industry standard sculpting and organic tool, and you can do more and more stuff, poly modeling and hard surface modeling and armor building things inside it. It's not free, but they do a hobby version, which is like 180 USD for a perpetual license, so it's like $10 a month on a subscription. So it's a very affordable tool. The other thing that I'm going to be using at my end for the sculpting side of things is I have a Wacom here. This is like a $50 sculpting tablet. You don't need anything super high end. I do have a $300 Intuos, which is broken and entirely useless, and I've replaced it with a $50 one, and honestly I can't tell the difference. So you don't need to spend a lot of money to be able to use these tools.
That's good to know, because all I have is the $50 one. Yeah, for those of you who were expecting this last week, that's right. Not only did Russ's tablet break, but also Melissa's tablet broke.
Yeah, it did.
Wow, okay. Yes, yeah, the woeful story of my Wacom tablet breaking. So it was playing up last week, and then it completely kaputted by Monday, and so this is my new one, and I love it. Right, okay, so where shall we start? Do you want me to walk you through the workflow of how a miniature like this would get created, and then we can get into some specifics?
Yeah, I think definitely, one part of this is just the curiosity of how does someone like you work on a thing like this?
Sure. So, something like Cloven, obviously this is a character I created for myself, so I didn't have any artwork or a design brief to go from, but even if I had, the process would be broadly the same. So the first thing to notice is with any miniature that we build, it's actually made out of a series of parts. I've got a whole stack of parts here, and these can be thought of a bit like layers in a Photoshop. So all of these different elements have been created separately. So for example, that's his torso, and then the sculpting that forms his trousers. All of these separate elements combine to make up the model. So we don't have to work on the entire piece in one go. We can work on individual elements and streamline different parts. So I sculpted his face actually before I did any other work on Cloven. So I sculpted the head entirely separately, and then built the rest of him around once I'd sort of found the character that I wanted. So all miniatures are kind of done in this way, where we'll sculpt the armor, we'll build belts, we'll build the weapons, we'll sculpt the face, and that's why we can use different programs. I might create these belts and straps and the weapon in one program, and I might do this soft sculpting in a different program, and it'll vary from project to project. But a starting point would be to build just a sort of generic, sort of naked torso, get the approximate pose that I want, and then work from there. So let's give a concrete example of what some of this sculpting might look like. So if we isolate this part of him, originally this head was sculpted as a separate element on its own. So yeah, this was a work in progress. I hadn't finished the beard at this point. So this head was originally sculpted from a ball. You can kind of tell that if you see the back of the head on this incomplete version. And so I'm just going to give you a brief walk through how that looks, and then we'll jump into Blender and look at some different things. So organic stuff like heads and bodies and torsos, we do this in ZBrush. You can do this in Blender as well. They do have a sculpting suite. I'm not as familiar with it as I am the ZBrush suite, but the process is very much the same, where you'll have an object, and everything in all of the programs are made up out of different sized polygons, which are these little squares. And basically, the more detail we want to add, the finer we divide this down. So if I were to draw on this right now, we can create a curve, but you can see the individual pieces deforming. If I subdivide that, I can increase the number of polygons we have, and that will go smoother and smoother and smoother as I divide this lower and lower and lower. So when we're going to create something like a face, what we want to do first of all is just very roughly start to block out, by pushing and pulling on the surface of the model, the shapes that we want to create. So let's imagine we were going to create some sort of, I don't know, some sort of goblin type creature.
So let's say we're sculpting something for 3D printing.
Sure.
What do you recommend? How detailed do we need to be? Like, I have a anycubic photon. How polygon dense do we need to be here?
So the answer to that is obviously more detail is always better. There is a limit. I generally work on the principle that anything on the surface of the model that is going to be sort of smaller than about 0.5 millimeter is probably not going to be not going to show up. And anything that's raised up off the surface of the model, about 1.5 millimeters is about your limit. But what I mean by that is, if I just jump briefly back to clothing for a second, if we know that this model is about 32 millimeters high, so sort of 1 and a bit inches for imperial type peoples. So the surface on the detail of this chain can be quite fine because it's stuck against the surface of his body. So these gaps are fine. These are about 1/10 of a millimeter. His eyes are about 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters across. Whereas these lapels that stick out, the thickness through these needs to be about 1.5 to 2 millimeters because they're proud of the body. If they were thinner than that, they would be prone to breakage and they wouldn't print properly. And even if they did print, were this a model you were going to put into production, you'd struggle to get plastic or metal to cast into that part of the mold because it would be too thin. So you have to think about things like, the shield's been thickened to allow for that as well. So that is a definite factor. But I find when I'm sculpting creatures or monsters that are fairly complex in their shape, like if we're doing a dragon or something, we'll get into the tens of millions of polygons in a program like ZBrush, and it'll totally support that level of detail. Whereas, as you know from working with your printer, you really want files that are in the tens of thousands of polygons. So there is a process that you go through that will allow you to reduce the polygon count afterwards without altering the detail, but it stops the model being editable. It's a bit like turning a high definition photograph into a JPEG. You lose some of the definition, but you keep the detail, the visible detail.
Okay. Sort of like rasterizing the model.
Kind of, yeah.
I'm sure there is a better word. I'm sure there is a technical term. I shouldn't say lack of a better word, for lack of me knowing a better word.
They call it decimation because you literally are knocking polygons out of the process.
That sounds traumatic.
It does, but it's not too terrible.
See, right. And now if our viewers will just look at Melissa, this is one of the reasons I like to have Melissa in these streams, because she's just reaction box.
Yeah, she is a reaction box. I'm just amazed, just sitting here watching this happen in in under 2 minutes is insane.
I feel
this would take me 3 days.
I would spend 3 days
and it wouldn't look this good.
It would be a big blob. I think one of the other questions people have when they're starting out with this stuff is, how powerful of a computer do you need?
That's a really good question. So with something like ZBrush, they've actually done an amazing job optimizing this program. If you're on, I would argue that most modern laptops that people own for schoolwork or college that are running Excel and Word can probably run ZBrush fairly well. And the only issues you'll have is the time certain processes take to run. Like, for example, that decimation process I was talking about. Anything that's like requires the computer to do a bit of calculating and push a taskbar across the screen, that's going to be a problem. ZBrush, it has to be said, is notoriously quite flaky. It's not that it's badly programmed, it's that it does some fairly impressive and exciting things. And my evening beer just arrived.
Fantastic. Yes, for those of you who hadn't guessed, Russ is coming to us from the UK. So is it?
You hadn't figured it out.
Me away.
Not that I'm above morning beers, like everybody who knows that.
It's non-alcoholic as well. I don't actually drink alcohol. So.
Oh, well, John's a brewer, so it's his thing.
A little bit. I do.
Mortal offense.
Look what?
Yeah, I'm cheating for speed. I've got so one of the nice features of ZBrush is it has all of these sort of built-in brushes that will let you create surface detail very quickly. Normally, I wouldn't use something like this, but honestly, because I don't want our entire stream to be me just sculpting a head.
But
fun as that
wasn't
would
the
be,
plan, but I'm loving this. So
I could watch all day.
Yeah, like
I have no issue.
It's funny, when I started out, I didn't imagine that this could possibly be a spectator sport, but it's surprisingly compelling. And I say that in that I watch colleagues working. My studio, we have 4 of us that work for Steamforged as full-time sculptors, and we sit in a Discord because we're all in different locations. We'll sit in a Discord channel and chat and share our screens, and you can lose a lot of time watching a colleague sculpting, even though you're working on the same project and you're using the same techniques, but it's still quite compelling to see someone else creating.
Yeah.
There's something very, very fun about it. So what I've done here, you'll notice that he's gone a different shade of grey, and I've actually got 2 different layers, effectively, 2 different sets of pieces, because I want to be able to draw these teeth in using this sphere brush. I've separated the eyes to give me a separate area that I can add detail to without having to mess up the face, and the reason for that will become apparent in just a moment. Because what I want to be able to do is now go back to the face, and I want to deform the lips around the there we go, deform the lips around the teeth, and so I need the teeth to be separate so that I can just push in this detailing to make them stand out a little more. Effectively, what I'm doing this whole time is I'm using several different brushes that are fairly standard and come in all the versions of ZBrush. This is a slash brush. I think it's called the Damien standard brush in ZBrush, and it's designed to cut into a surface and create a line. But in all the ZBrush function, if you hold the Alt key down, it will do the opposite. So by holding Alt, I can get it to pull out. So I can use it to create these nice sharp edges. One of the things that you kind of learn doing this for the particular business we're in, which is making miniatures for people to paint, is you look to just enhance the edges of surfaces and the transitions between different planes, so that you've got surfaces that will catch paint and catch highlights and recesses that will take ink and so forth. So I'm just using the slash brush to do that. I have a clay brush, which I'm using for the basic build-up of the shapes, and there is a move brush, which lets me treat the whole model like an elastic clay, so I can adjust the proportions fairly broadly. We're probably going to leave this chap alone in a minute. I think he's good enough as a demonstration of what we can achieve in
what you can achieve.
What you can achieve in.
I mean, I do
Maybe
have the
with some more
advantage of experience. Yes, I wasn't this fast when I started out, but
How long have you been doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question.
professionally, about 7 years, and I sculpted as a hobbyist. I was a primary level school teacher, so I used to teach 5 to 10-year-old children, and I used to do this as a hobby, and then it slowly became my career, but not before a lot of children at my school had learned how to make things in Blender and in ZBrush.
It's good to hear that you used to teach young children, so perhaps I'll be able to follow along.
Can we have a tutorial for ZBrush another day?
My gosh.
I'm loving this. I am loving this. Ah!
We absolutely can. I'd be delighted to. One of my colleagues, Tom, recently ran a getting started in ZBrush character design course with Ryan Kingsley, who is one of the big sort of ZBrush teachers, and it was a phenomenal course. But honestly, getting someone to this level is not too challenging. I always like to start with things like goblins and skeletons.
Seems great. That's insane.
I think the nice thing about goblins and monsters and stuff is there's a little bit of preconceived expectation of what it should look like, but you're not looking for a human face.
Exactly. We avoid a lot of this sort of uncanny valley problems that can otherwise mess a model up. That's not too bad for however long it's been.
I think so. Not to backtrack too much, but with the how powerful of a computer do you need? Do these programs, and maybe it's different for different programs, maybe that's why ZBrush is more optimized, but do they draw more on the processing power or on the graphics?
That's a fair question. ZBrush is entirely CPU based. It's not interested in your graphics card at all. It just wants to know about your GPU. It just wants to know about your CPU, and it likes RAM. It's a big fan of memory. Right. So just before we finish, I just wanted to show this. Our model is currently, I don't know how well this will come up because my screen's quite small resolution, but we're at 2.1 million polygons on this head to capture this level of detail. Now, we couldn't ever print that, so what we would do is we'd go to our decimation tools. If we were going to print this, choose maybe 150,000 polys, hit this button, and this will now read our model and process it and turn it into a printable file. So we could then output this and throw this goblin head onto a 3D printer, and I can set the scale of this at any point. So I've actually done it in the past where we've had a 32mm miniature that we've sculpted, and then we've scaled it up and done an extra detail pass and printed it as like a 72mm bust. So we can change the scale and change the detail levels according to what it is we need, but it gives us a printable version of our little goblin. So there he is. Yeah, he's quite cute. Okay, so
he is. I love it.
That's a quick walk through ZBrush. So bear in mind that process when we're talking about overall miniatures design. So hopefully that gives you some insight. When you look at now, if you look at something like Clovin's face and hair, you've got some mental image of how this was created.
Yeah.
But let's talk about bringing the rest of the model together, because obviously he's wearing armor with trim around it. He's got this shield on his back with his symbol, and he's got his weapon. So the other end of things, and again, like I say, this is how I work. One of my colleagues, Tom, works entirely in ZBrush. If he's making weapons or armor or anything, he does it all in ZBrush because he's very focused on optimizing his workflow in one program. I'm very comfortable bouncing between different programs, so I like to work in Blender as well. So this is the point where we can do some follow along, and we're going to make a sword.
This is where things get weird.
Okay, so my screen may look different to yours, only in that I am focused on front view with orthographic camera and nothing on the screen. To understand the Blender orientation, I'm going to quickly add a cube, and I'll move. So I'm using middle mouse button to just move around my cube a little bit. If you press 1 on your number pad, you'll go to the front view. If you press 7, you go to the top view. And if you press 3, you go to the side view. If you press the number pad 5, that'll flip between orthographic and perspective. I always work in orthographic. It's just a personal preference. I know a lot of people will turn perspective on because it's more accurate for doing like image renders and stuff, but because I'm building miniatures, orthographic helps me because I don't want any distortion, because these parts are going to be small in real life. Okay.
I'm on a Mac and none of these hotkeys are doing anything.
Yeah, I think I made a mistake doing this on a Mac. I should have probably done this on PC.
You're absolutely fine. If you go into Edit and go to Preferences,
Okay.
there is in here, I just need to remember where it is because I very rarely need it.
Yeah.
There we go. Under Input, there is an Emulate Number Pad, and if you tick it, you'll find that the top row keys on the keyboard will also work for navigation.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so how do we get to the
Yes. Oh, I love this.
Is 5 on the keyboard.
This is one of the rare times.
Are we studying birds?
when I know more than John? And
there's a lot of times.
Okay, if you can get yourself, like I have, to the point where you've got your orthographic, you're in the front view, and you've got a cube at the center of the screen, we are golden. Are we all good with our cubes?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I have a cube.
Awesome. Okay, the first thing that anyone coming into Blend for the first time will discover is that it has 2 main modes, and these are flipped between, by default, pressing the Tab key. Now, what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is demonstrate a couple of things in quick succession, and then I'll Control-Z back out and walk us through it so you've got some context of what we're doing.
Yes.
To make our sword, what we're actually going to do is delete all but one of our vertices, and we're going to basically dot to dot draw it, use a mirror modifier to create the other half of it and bring the blade together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one vertex, and I'm going to then use Control I, or whatever, Command I believe, which inverts my selection, press my delete key and delete all my vertices. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So if everyone would like to basically get to a point where they have one vertex, the last thing I want to do before we start making stuff is I want to go over to this right hand panel, and one of the icons on here is looks like a spanner, and this is where we add modifiers. We're going to be using 2 modifiers during this process. We'll add one immediately, and we'll add one slightly further down the line. So we're going to add a mirror modifier, and we want to, it'll be in the X axis, and we want to turn on clipping, which is not turned on by default. And what clipping does is it stops us from accidentally crossing the mirror line and drawing on the wrong side of the screen. Okay.
Keeps everything on your side of the table.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is just go and click on Add Modifier.
Click Add Modifier, choose Mirror. There'll be a whole bunch of different options. It'll be in the first column, about halfway down.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
make sure clipping's turned on, and then we're ready to start.
Clipping is turned off. Okay, yep.
And don't hit apply. Also,
yeah, clicking is turned on.
That does a different thing.
And don't hit apply. Okay.
Don't hit apply.
That's going to be my next question.
No. Apply is something we do at the very end of this process.
Sorry, I had a feeling that somebody was going to hit apply, and it was going to be a whole thing.
Very valid point. So basically, modifiers are they're virtual until you hit apply, and then they become real. So if we draw one half of the model, the other half will appear on the screen, but it doesn't exist until we hit apply. Yeah. So it's a good way of working in a non-destructive way because we can remove the modifiers at any point. Okay, cool. Right. Oh, the other thing is if you accidentally click and move your 3D cursor to a different place at any point from the center of the screen, Shift-C will move it back to the center. Right, I'm going to select my little vertex, there it is, and the G key will let you move it around, and I'm going to position it so it's in a sort of 2 o'clock position from my center. And then the main key I'm going to be using now is E, and again I'll do a couple to demonstrate what I'm doing, and then we'll do it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use E, which is the extrude function, to draw the shape of my blade. So I'm just literally going to go, and you'll see it drawing on the other side as well, and I'm pretty much just making up something that looks vaguely interesting. I'm not too worried about my detail. You'll notice that where I've got curves, I'm using slightly more dots if the curve is tighter and less dots if the curve is shallower. That's because if you've ever worked with something like Illustrator, it kind of bases how tight or shallow a curve is based on how close together the dots are. So that's, and then I'm going to come round like so, and that's going to be the shape of my blade.
Okay.
So I ran into an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry.
No.
when I hit the G button in order to get the vertices to move around,
Yeah.
apparently I can't select it. I don't know what's up with that.
Try clicking it with the other mouse button. I know that sounds weird, but Blender sometimes, depending on how your Blender's set up, it might have a right-click select set up instead of a left-click select.
Yeah, I think that might be the default now, because I think with 2.8 that they changed.
One of the things that new users find really weird is for some reason they decided to make the select function completely opposite to every other program in existence.
Yeah, because I think I had to change mine, which is why mine is...
If you still can't select it,
Okay.
Are we good or are we no?
I think we're good now. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just first select it, then click G, and then you're gonna hit E
Yeah.
or hold
Hit
down
E.
E is the one that will basically, E is extrude. So each time you hit E, it's going to pull a new vertex out of the one you just had and a line to connect them. So you just dot to dot the shape that you want to create.
Ah. Okay. Cool. All right. Now I caught up. Sorry.
Okay. You'll notice that it's drawing it in on the other side because of the mirror modifier. Because of clipping, when you move it to the center, it'll stick to the center. So I don't know how obvious this was when I was doing it, but I make the center one the last one I draw because you can't extrude off that center line because it wants to stay stuck there. So I always go to the center. I never try and come from the center.
So how do you ensure that the vertices on both sides are right there in the middle?
It'll do that by default.
It's going to do by default. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
You'll notice at the center of your screen there's a little orange dot with a circle around it. That's the origin of your cube, and it's using that to draw the axis of your mirror. So as long as that's in the center, it'll draw it in the center. And actually, even if your cube wasn't in the center of the scene, it would still figure it out. It's kind of clever how it knows what it's doing.
Neat. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Right, cool. Now what we're going to do, or again I'll demonstrate it on my screen, is we're going to put a blade edge on this sword. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, and you can start this more or less anywhere that isn't the center, but I'm going to start on this corner and I'm going to extrude off it. And what I want to do is I want to mimic the shape and the number of vertices I already have. So I'm imagining what this is a big fat sword. It's a very Blizzard would be proud of a sword like this. It's a very big fat sword. So I'm going to do this, and then coming down here again, making sure that my center point's the last points I draw. I'm going to do this. So what I've done is I extruded out from that corner, went up, and then went back to my original point and came down. So I've got one connecting line, and then these two outlines. And then this bit is where the really fun bit happens, because now we're going to actually turn these lines into a solid object. This is where it gets cool. You'll have noticed that straight away, working in Blender, it doesn't have that instant kind of wizardry sensation that you get working in ZBrush. ZBrush is properly magic in a can.
I'm going to do mine a little thinner.
Yeah, if I wanted to make mine thinner, I would just hit A to select all, and then I could scale it in on the X-axis to narrow it. But I'm okay having a big fat sword. I'm cool with it. This is my homage to FF7 remake. Big sword.
The Buster Sword,
The
or one of
Buster
many.
Sword.
Yes, Final Fantasy fan. Woo! Sorry.
Now, is it okay if the line between the inner and outer line are a little closer together? Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine. What we're going to do now is basically connect all of this together and turn it into a solid. So I'll run through it on my screen. I'll do a couple and then give you guys a chance. And I'm going to start this from where I've got my connecting line. I could start it from down here. It doesn't really matter. All I'm doing is I'm selecting 1, 2, 3, 4 vertices that would form a quadratic shape, and hitting F and it will form that quad.
Okay.
And once I've formed one, you should find you can select 2 off its edge, and then every time you press F, it will fill it in.
Wait, 2 of its edge? What? That's so cool.
Yeah.
And it will quickly give us the outline of our blade.
Nope, I messed that one up.
Ah, nope. No.
Guys, he said
There we go.
He said he was going to show us stuff, and then we're going to go back. Oh.
It's okay.
Oh, sorry. I'm already like,
No,
Oh,
I know.
yeah,
You
if I'm
gotta,
honest.
we're not patient around here.
No, that's absolutely fine. If you guys want to fly into it, you can. This is where you get to find out if you got the corresponding number of inner and outer edge vertices right, because if you didn't, then at some point it'll try and make a triangle instead of a quad.
Yes. All right, so we're just gonna.
You're fine.
This is where the C tool is my best friend.
What does the C tool do?
It's just a selection tool. It's my favorite way of selecting.
It's like a brush select, so you can just sort of scribble over things. There's a B, which is a box as well, so you can drag select things. And A will select all, and double A will deselect all.
A selects all. Yeah, double A does deselect.
Sure does.
B.
And Shift A is how you add things.
Mine-
That's not relevant. I'm just saying things because I know them and it makes me happy.
I know
Mine is
stuff.
probably gonna have to turn out like a arrowhead, maybe.
That's cool. Okay, let's do a couple of other things.
Everything's gone wrong.
Yes. Oh.
Show us what else.
Okay, right. So what I'm going to do now is we need to fill in the main body of the blade. And what we want to do is bring these vertices straight to our center. But again, we want to keep quads. So if you imagine that by bringing them to the center, we're going to create one extra point up the middle. I want to count up 1, 2, 3, and that's going to be where I pull across. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to select all of my inners. And again, I'm going to stop 1, 2, 3. So let me do this on my screen, and then I can explain it more clearly what's going on. I'm going to hit E again to extrude, and I'm also going to press X, which will only let me extrude on the X-axis, so it'll only move side to side. And bring it to the center. Oops. Uh-oh. There we go. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Okay, so I've extruded them to the center, and what I hope is apparent is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so I can press F.
Yeah.
And 1, 2, 3, 4. By leaving those 3, it creates a natural quad at the top and the bottom, which finishes off the shape, and that gives us this flat but quite interesting shape.
Oh, I'm gonna have fun with this.
Yeah,
I've got a question.
Yeah, go.
Sorry. Okay, so I didn't see that you added additional vertices up towards the tip of the blade, and I'm wondering, how do you add, I guess, new lines, new edges?
Oh yeah, at this
if you're
point,
missing?
could you add a new vertex in?
Yes, you absolutely could. So, was the other question going to be why are we trying to make everything four-sided shapes?
Exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay, so
He has taught children.
I'll go. Both of these things are actually handily really connected in how they interact. So, adding new vertices is as easy as adding an extra edge loop in. And the reason we work with four-sided shapes is because if you imagine you've got a square and you want to cut it through the middle from one side to the other, the line will go through the center and come out in a predictable direction. If you're trying to do that to a triangle or a pentagon or any other equal-sided number of sides, the line cannot pass through the center and then pass out the edge of the center of the edge of another line. So the shape will get split in unpredictable ways, and that will affect both when we add extra loops and extra edges, but also, as we saw in ZBrush, if we're subdividing it to make it smoother and smoother, we want predictable subdivision so that it stays smooth and it stays crisp in the ways we want it to. So basically, using four-sided shapes makes everything predictable and easy to control.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so to add an extra loop, I can do this. I can come to here. Let's imagine, for example, I decided I wanted to add an extra loop in here because I wanted a vertex here that I could pull out. I can press Shift and R on my keyboard.
Do you have to
Or
select
possibly
anything?
even, no, sorry, I can press Control and R on my keyboard. And this yellow line appears. And basically, wherever I click, it'll put an edge in that place. So if I go on this line, it's always trying to do it perpendicular to the line I'm over. So this line would create one running the length of the sword. This one will create one running across the sword. If I click once, it adds the line and I can slide to exactly the position I want.
Ooh.
And I can click again. And I now have an extra edge and an extra set of vertices that I can move around and deform.
Okay, so silly question. Do you have to select the area, or is it just because of where your mouse is?
It's where your mouse is. So if I do that,
Okay.
if I do that again and just move around the whole object, you'll see it trying to guess where I want to put it based on where it thinks the mouse position is.
Okay, great. And then, for the sake of people who have goldfish like memory, which is me, I have a poor memory. You said Control R?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the R stands for ring.
There it is. Woo!
Okay, so if you for some reason wanted to make like a second step to your edge, like maybe it's a real old sword and it's been found to next, that's stupid for a sword. Let's say you're making a gemstone.
Mm-hmm.
You want to add an extra facet in, you could just like throw it along that whole.
Absolutely, you
edge.
could. Yeah, I could do that now and add an extra, and then that would give me an extra bevel.
Very cool.
Okay, so now that we've got our sword in the flat, we've got one side of it, but it's currently has no 3D quality to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, and this is several steps at once, so I'll show them, then we'll all go back. I'm going to turn on the Y-axis mirror as well, which means it's now mirroring it in the front to back view as well as the side to side. And I'm just rotating around the model so you can see that very clearly. I'm then going to hit A to select all, and I'm going to move it by pressing G and then pressing Y. So I'm moving it in the Y-axis to bring them close enough together that I can get a nice sword blade.
Oh, okay.
So let me come back out of there. So first things first, turn on the Y-axis in my mirror modifier. Hit A to select all of your vertices. Hit G to be able to move the object, and then press Y so it's moving on the Y-axis, and you can only move it forwards and backwards. And then just move it till it's sort of about there, really. I mean, we're doing this a bit by eye. We could be doing this with really precise measurements, but for this first walkthrough, it's easy enough to do it by eye.
To make this a little pointier.
This is bad. I'm the slow one.
I gotta catch up. I just gotta fill in my story. Well, I've just been watching. So.
Absolutely fine.
Okay, so I got stuck at the whole add the edge loops thing that I didn't get a chance to do the filling.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'll be honest. I kind of missed it. Oh no.
I missed that hotkey.
Let me jump back. So the bit where I pulled all the vertices to the middle, that bit. What I'll do is I'll delete mine out and put them back in again, just so it's absolutely clear what I'm doing.
There you go. Yep. Thank you.
What I did was I counted down 1, 2, 3 from the top, selected the third one, and then I held down Shift and selected all of the others and stopped at the third one from the bottom. So I've got 1, 2. So basically, you've got 2 unselected at the top and the bottom, and then the third one at the top and the bottom is the start and the finish of your selected edges. If that makes any kind of sense.
Hold on, give me just.
I'm looking at the glee on Jonathan's face as this is happening.
Give me just a second for you, because I also had an issue with that, and then I Control-Z'd one too many times.
Wait. Stop. Unselect. Control Z. Okay. Okay, wait. So I gotta select the whole thing now. I'm at the part where I'm doing the Y mirror. So
my F key is.
I'll wait.
Once you've selected all of those, you press it. You hit E to get the extrude function working again.
Okay.
And then you press X. Whenever you activate a tool, if you press X or Y or Z, you lock it to that axis. Because it's locked to X, you can only move side to side. So you just pull it all to the middle, and you should end up with it all connected apart from a hole at the bottom and a hole at the top.
With the question in chat, BJ.
Yeah.
Why not select all of them instead of counting the 3 down?
It's a very, very valid question. We'd never select that top one anyway because it's already at the center. So if we selected all of them and didn't worry about leaving that gap, X, I end up with a triangular shape at the top and the bottom, and that's going to cause us a problem later. So basically, we're avoiding that triangular shape by extruding in such a way that we only keep quads. Generally, you just have to remember triangle's bad.
Yeah.
And this bit here where I've turned on my Y modifier and then moved the 2 sides close together, do you want me to just walk through that again?
Yeah.
Please.
Sure. No problem at all. So everyone should be at some variant of this on their screen.
I gotta re-extrude all this stuff because I had to.
No problem.
I had that extra vertice laying around there.
I got my weird chunky arrowhead.
You're not alone.
Why am I?
This is great. And when we get this over on YouTube, we'll have lots of clips of like the stuff that Sarah's struggling right now. So if you're at home and are struggling with some of the same stuff, you can kind of see like
The chances that anyone could do this like flawlessly first out the gate, it's, you know, I really struggled with this stuff when I started. It took me a lot of perseverance to get even this far. So
people often assume, I think, that like free software is going to be like, oh, it's super user friendly and easy to. This is still professional grade software, so there's 100%. A learning.
And I'm a big believer in that statement that like someone who calls themselves an expert is just someone that's already made all of the mistakes. So like failure is part of the path to success.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I think I have fixed. Oh my gosh. Okay. That's okay. Whoa, Lord. I don't know what in the world. I had like 3 vertices and they weren't joined. It was like a whole thing down there. I don't know what. I got it fixed now.
Though. Party on your screen.
Isn't that, dude?
All right, and then how did you fill the top and bottom triangle?
I just selected, so 1, 2, oops. Okay. So I went 1, 2, 3, 4, shift select, and then hit F and did the same at the bottom, and that filled in those last.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, F, fill. Yep, okay. Now I caught up.
Excellent. Okay, so the next stage is, and what I've done here to make this easier is I've hit that middle mouse button. I've just rotated myself to about 45 degrees off center because I'm going to need to be able to see behind the model. I've gone to my mirror modifier and I've turned on the Y-axis mirror, which has turned on the front to back because Blender uniquely uses Y as forwards and backwards and Z as up. No other program does, but
check off
okay. I thought I was going crazy.
No, you're absolutely not going crazy. It's a Blenderism.
So they're looking basically at the top-down view as your standard XY.
Yeah. And
then Z is your.
They absolutely are.
So I guess they're kind of in a way treating it like a 3D printer. Even they call it the Z lift, but like the program doesn't treat that as Z. So yeah.
No, it's
its own thing.
It's a thing. It's a thing. Okay, so you turn on the Y-axis and we got that front to back. I press A on my keyboard, which is select all.
Pressing A.
And everything lights up. And then I hit G, which lets you move. And then Y, just like with the extrude and the X, by hitting Y after G, it lets us only move forwards or backwards. Okay. And basically, we're just sliding these 2 objects until they are close-ish together. I'm doing this entirely by eye, which is extremely poor teaching on my part, but experience tells me that having them this far apart will give me a blade that's printably thick. So
and you were saying you want to shoot for about what'd you say, 2 millimeters?
Yeah, you're looking to make the blade between 1.5 and 2 millimeters thick. So I mean, one of the things that we haven't talked about is that grid in the background. You can actually use that as a millimeter guide, because if you use that guide as a scale ratio, even though you haven't final scaled your object, if you decide that that's 42 millimeters, you can then make it 42 and you'll know your other dimensions will match.
Yeah, you can decide the scale.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. There's a whole journey over here that's happening. I kept hitting move instead of extrude.
Blender is so exciting when you do it.
I got it.
It's amazing.
So now I'm at the point to where I do the Y-axis thing.
Okay, cool.
But it's fine.
Okay, so here's a question.
Yeah.
Let's say I think I made it too thin and I need to move it again. What button do I press?
Wait, can I take this? Press G and then Y. And then you can move them again.
But make sure you do A first.
Yeah, make sure everything's selected.
Okay, so G and then Y.
And then move your mouse around, you'll see it
move. That was
I'm learning.
I've went on a whole journey over here.
So the general tools, we haven't talked about any of the other tools because we've only needed the G and the E. So it's like S for scale, R for rotate, E for extrude, and G they always say is for grab because they didn't use M for reasons nobody does. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit AA, which will deselect everything. I'm going to hold down Shift. No, I'm not. I'm going to hold down Alt. and I'm going to click on one of these edges running down the side of the blade. And by holding down Alt, it selects the entire continuous loop of edges from the top to the bottom of the blade. Then what I want to do is I want to hit G and Y again. And basically, I'm going to bring these two together until they touch. And suddenly...
They won't go past each other because you have clipping.
And they won't go past each other because of clipping. But now, our blade has an edge.
Aha!
It's like a blade on my screen.
Mine looks like a dagger. It's like super oof.
What is it? Mine's like an arrowhead. It's a tiny blade. It's a tiny little blunt.
Okay, so...
Yeah, mine doesn't have much of a point. Did you extrude your outer vertices any at all before you... Or move them any at all before you...
No, but you can adjust them at any point. Like, if I wanted to make this point more pointy, I could grab it now, hit G, pull it up. You know, if I wanted to bring this out, I could hit G, bring it across. So you can modify the shape of the model at any time. Like, if I decided right now my blade was too thin, I could hit A and GY again. And because those are stuck together, they won't separate now. So I can thicken the blade while still keeping the edge.
Yeah, I feel like my blade was a little too. I don't know. I want it thinner, so I'm just gonna undo and Y and move it a little closer.
Absolutely fine. We're going to do one more thing to our blade now, which is we're going to do the most. We're into advanced territory now.
Woohoo!
Okay, this is because obviously at the moment we've got the shape of our sword, but it's very faceted and it looks quite crude. So now we're going to make it look silky smooth and really awesome.
Ooh.
So what I'm going to do is we're going to add a new modifier, and I'll warn you now, when I first add this, the blade's going to look terrible, but go with me. So I'm going to go over to add modifier, and I'm going to choose subdivision surface, and this basically does that thing I talked about, splitting the shapes down into smaller and smaller surfaces.
Love it.
Like Play-Doh.
I love the subdivision modifier.
I'm going to set the viewport settings to 2, which will give me a fairly smooth blade, but as you can see, it's lost all of its definition.
You said you set it to 2? How'd you do that?
Where you've added it, if you look, it says subdivision, it says render viewport and quality, change viewport from 1 to 2. I mean, change it to 3, change it to any number you like, but the higher you make that viewport number, the more times it subdivides, and the smaller each of those individual quads becomes, and the smoother the overall effect will be.
Ah.
And I'll just say,
Gotcha.
I am collapsing my mirror modifier panel for the moment so I don't accidentally click on anything I should.
Yeah, that's not a bad shout. The order of the order in which you have the modifiers can matter. In this particular instance, it wouldn't really matter if subdivision was above mirror or if mirror was first, but Blender processes them in the order they appear in the stack. So the mirror is being calculated first, and sometimes that matters, but not for what we're doing here.
I can really see now. I had a bunch of extra vertices down at the bottom. I don't know what in the world I was doing over here.
Okay, this is where. Do you remember earlier we talked about you asked about adding extra loops, and we did the Control R. Mm-hmm. Control R now is going to do some amazing things because our extra loops are going to sharpen all our edges up. So let me demonstrate on my screen, and then we can all have a go. So I'm going to hit Control R. I'm going to hover over the edge of the blade. So I'm perpendicular to this loop, and I'm running down the full length. I'm going to click, and I'm going to slide it towards the edge. And you can see my edge sharpening. I'm going to do the same thing again and bring it back towards the inner edge, and you can see that edge sharpening. And you can now see those edges have crisped up, because the closer together we put these loops, the smaller and tighter it tries to make the polygons. And so this method of adding extra loops is going to let us crisp and sharpen all of our key edges.
Okay.
So by doing this, I'm going to let me just show you the shape target that we're aiming for. Is we're trying to create something that looks a little like this.
Excellent.
And the way I've done that, let me just take those loops back off again, is I've accidentally deleted my mirror modifier then. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, fine. Blender, I'll put it back. You're not the boss of me.
I do what I want.
So the places we're targeting the loops is, I want them on the points where my curves meet my sharp edge. So I put one above and below that specific vertex line. So one there and one there, and that sharpens that edge up. And I want them on I want to crisp up these edges, so I put them on there. I want them on this edge.
We have a question.
Yeah.
We actually got a few questions. Let me make sure we don't miss any. But one of them is there any good way to make use of multiple monitors? Because somebody's saying they got like 3 monitors set up. Does it help you be any more efficient if you spread out the windows or tools? Can you break stuff out?
So working within the program, not specifically. However, what I tend to do is if I'm working with reference art, so if I've had a concept piece come through, or I'm doing something like, let's take Horizon Zero Dawn. When I was on that project, we would have a lot of screenshots or video footage from the video game, and so I'd have that on one monitor, and I'd be paused, and I'd have different views, and I'd use that as reference, so I could work directly between one and the other. So there's not really a multi-monitor setup within the programs that I've found is particularly efficient for the program itself, but in terms of your overall workflow, having that extra space for reference, or even you could have ZBrush on one screen and Blender on the other and be able to bounce between the two without having to keep minimizing. So there's lots of efficiencies you can have, but nothing that's really specific to the programs themselves.
I have a question.
Yep.
In order to like capture the accuracy of the character or the object that you're modeling, I remember this back in college years ago, that instead of having it like another separate window, you can actually import that image in the project. So then it'll be like you've got your front character or object in the front camera view, and then you add another image for the side view, so that way you have a map to follow as you
yes, you absolutely can. Yes,
okay.
You can. For things like weapons, that's really, really handy. You know, if we had a drawing of our swords or our daggers, we could load it in. You do it. You go up to add, and you hang on, tab out here. Yeah, you go to add, and you choose image, background image, and you can bring it in and use that in the background to work from. For character work specific to what I'm doing, obviously things that have been designed for video games or general art don't necessarily have the same proportions as a miniature needs, because miniature proportions are weird. They have big heads and stumpy legs and huge hands because they're so small scale. So it becomes less useful then, because you've got to do so much proportional translation to make it work as a miniature that a direct one-to-one can't be possible.
So this is fun. Our friends over at Forged Foam actually made us cosplay versions of our in-game weapons.
That's nice.
And the great thing is, like, it's already kind of built like a 3D model. Where
it 100% is, yeah.
It's extra chunky, like you would need for a mini,
Minis.
and it's got like very explicit kind of edges and facets. So yeah. I'm going to be trying to make this one.
My advice to you would be lay it on a plain coloured background, or hang it on a wall, whatever. Take a photo from at least 2 meters away with a decent high-res camera, and then crop that photo in and load it as a background image. You want to take it from at least 2 meters away to minimize the amount of perspective distortion that you get, and then you crop in to get the detail that you need. And then you can pretty much do a one-to-one trace in Blender. You could add that as a background image and do exactly what we've been doing, but you'd be able to follow all of the shapes, and it would show you exactly where to put all of your vertices.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Awesome,
that sword, Chat Mandari, that sword was given to us by our friends over at Forged Foam. Check them out, forgedfoam.com.
That's awesome. Yeah, sort of LARP and reenactments, like cosplay weapons, any foam craft stuff, has very similar kind of construction proportions to the weapons you find on minis, so it's actually a really good reference source for that kind of thing. Yeah, so Control R will add your points, and basically what you've got to imagine is anywhere where you want an edge to be sharp, you need to push an edge up against it. So I wanted this edge to be sharp, so I need to add one here and pull it towards that edge, and I need to add another one on the underside and push it up towards it. And the closer the edges get to each other, the sharper they will be. So if I zoom right in for the benefit of the audience, you can see that this corner here is still still got a curve on it. So if I add an edge loop here and pull it, you can see that curve sharpening in real time as these edges get closer together.
Yes.
And for the tip of the blade, where did you put your edge loop for?
Directly from the top of the blade to the bottom. So I placed it on the center line and I pushed it towards the center, almost all the way across. The only thing you don't want to do is don't go all the way to the middle, because of that mirror modifier. At the point where it reaches the mirror line, Blender will basically stop calculating it as a line. It'll effectively stop working. So you bring it really close to the center line, but don't let it actually get all the way there. But we're talking like tenths of millimeters away is enough.
Oh, see, I've created myself a bit of a triangle at the top, so it doesn't want to add an edge.
Yeah, that's discovering the hard way why those quads are so useful. So hopefully what should be apparent as we get to this point with our blades is that creating things like hilts or handles, fundamentally we're going to do the same thing. You know, if I wanted to now put a handle on this, I can add. I've pressed Shift C to make sure that my cursor is back to the center, and I can add an object, and I could add, say, I suppose a cylinder. I can use S for scale, GZ, SZ, SZ. So I could add that as a handle.
Whoa.
And
fast.
And so on and so forth. What I would like to do very quickly is to sort of clarify for the benefit of the people at home and yourselves, clarify the workflow, the interaction between Blender and ZBrush when we're modeling things, is I'm just going to briefly drop my sword out. This is not something obviously that you guys are going to be able to do at your end, but if I just export this somewhere. So I'm exporting this as an OBJ file, which is, it's kind of the universal 3D file. With it in ZBrush, I can do things that would not be possible in Blender. So what I'm going to do is turn it into a sculptable mesh. And so this is the ability, this is the power of a program like ZBrush that we have, is we can now add our runic detail.
Now it's a magic sword.
And now it's a proper magic sword.
Oh my god!
So when you're thinking about sculpting these to be minis, when you're making like a design like this, and you assume that the person painting it is probably not going to want to get in there with the brush, they're probably just going to want to get their wash in there or whatever.
Absolutely.
How deep would you make that?
So again, it's something that you kind of learn over time, but as a general rule, something needs to be at least 1/4 of a millimeter, and really you're aiming for about 1/2 millimeter deep. I have there are different tools with different finishes and effects that you can use for this stuff. It's the same, like, again, we talk about the Alt key, you know, we can actually make that as raised surface detail as well if we so chose. But in all of these cases, it's a bit of a learn by doing. I will often print small parts of a model and just check how that detail looks at scale. One of the reasons that we don't produce models using an Anycubic, but I prototype on an Anycubic because it gives me that sanity check to make sure the stuff is appropriate. So if we go into a bit of tech talk, this was a UV mapped cylinder in the shape of the sleeve.
Yeah.
And then I applied a repeating chainmail texture to it as a bump map, and then generated displacement on the surface using the bump map as a guide, and just grew the chainmail straight out the surface of the model. So I didn't have to sculpt any of it. It was all procedurally generated using a bump map as well.
I'll say that is one of the things that like I have struggled with the most in learning Blender is use UV maps and textures.
God, how do I explain this now? There's like another window. Yeah, I'm trying. Oh, unless you want to, go ahead, Russ. Probably better.
The way I always describe it to people is like when you buy a cereal box, obviously it comes shaped like a box with cereal in, but when it's printed in the factory, that box is folded out flat so that the printer can print the surface onto the box. A UV map, in fact, here we go, we can see one. A UV map is just taking the surface of the model and unwrapping it flat in a way the computer can understand, so that color and texture information can be applied, and then the computer takes that and wraps it back around the 3D model. So this is an example of one of the characters from Gods here that we did for digital purposes. So that's its UV map over there.
Yeah.
And then that's the 3D version. And this is how like all modern video games work. You have a high detail and a lower detail version.
Yeah.
And so by creating simple UV maps, it's possible to wrap a chainmail texture around something, which is the example we've got here. And then ZBrush can basically grow the model through that texture. You can displace it and make that texture an actual physical 3D object using the mapped detail as your starting point, which is incredibly time saving.
So I've got my little arrowhead here. Let's say I want to make it a spearhead.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be like one button to make a big cylinder in Blender, right?
There is. It is add mesh cylinder.
Yeah, got to be in object mode. So
Yes, yeah. You need to,
okay.
you need to hit tab to come
I
out.
saw the
Okay.
face,
They're like, yeah.
and
Add
luckily
mesh cylinder. Okay.
I know John well enough to know exactly what was.
And then
Yeah. So, because I feel like with the what you showed us with the blade, that's like you said, if you're going to make hilts, if you're going to make anything that's like a custom polygon shape, that's pretty much all you need to know. You can just repeat that.
absolutely, and then
And
you can
do
just
it.
add the primitive objects like the cylinders and the cubes to build stuff up. I mean, the super quick version. You know, if I added a cube now, I could enter that cube. I could scale it down, scale it in X, move it down, and you know we've got a very basic hand guard. And the great thing is here, if you wanted to print this, Lord knows why, but if you did, you just shift select those, export them all as a 3D object as a group, and then when you load that into Netfab or Mesh Mixer or whatever program you use to prepare your brute files, it will automatically see that as one object, and when you run that through your normal mesh cleanup, it'll delete out all the missing vertices and turn it into one piece, and then that will just print as a sword ready to go with the handle and the guard and the blade all together. So you don't need to you don't have to sit here. The very first printing I ever did, I made a little elemental character. It was like a sort of goldfish creature, and I didn't know that 3D print software would automatically clean my model up. So I spent about 3 hours in Blender, manually stitching eyeballs to eyelids and fingernails into place. It was hell, and I would save you that pain. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's all handled by the program when you prep the model for printing.
I've got currently a very large blade with a very tiny handle.
That's cool. Everything can scale up separately.
Yeah, everything can be scaled separately. So, you know, if we were to take this object now, I mean, again,
Move this. Oh, I love this. Well, I think we're coming towards the end of the time that you.
I have a 5-bean chili on the stove downstairs.
That's important.
But this has been, I feel like, I definitely feel like I've got enough information now to build some weapons and some cool other props and objects and stuff to add on to my mini models. So if y'all are interested in 3D printing, I do have a video over on our YouTube where I kind of show my slapdash lazy sort of workflow to get from an STL file to set it up to print. There's of course videos of people who are much more in depth with their support placement and stuff, but not this guy. I want to know just enough to get it done. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, check out our YouTube. And we're probably going to start doing more kind of general content like this, because customizing your minis, especially if you or somebody has a 3D printer at home, there are lots of great Kickstarters where you can get mini files to base from, and then if you want to do a little tweak, you know how to do it from here.
There's loads of stuff. Check out steamforged.com. Find me on Twitter at Russ_Charles. I'm usually wittering on about D&D and posting pictures of my dogs, which is very on brand. And if you guys look at ZBrush Core, or you want me to come back and talk about a little bit more about sculpting or talk about setting up 3D prints, I, like you, I'm very get it done, get it on the print and get it working.
I'll be honest, you can come back and talk about anything you want.
Well, that's very kind of you.
We would love to have you back. We'll
please
schedule something, and
that would be awesome,
because
this
was
fun.
amazing.
It's been great. Thanks very much for having me.
But again, thank you, Russ, so much for taking
You're
your
welcome.
time to teach us and the people how to get started here in Blender. Have a good one, folks. We will see you later.